Welcome to the Industrial Talk Podcast with Scott MacKenzie. Scott is a passionate industry professional dedicated to transferring cutting-edge, industry-focused innovations and trends while highlighting the men and women who keep the world moving. So put on your hard hat, grab your work boots, and let's go.
All right, once again, welcome to Industrial Talk. Thank you very much for joining the #1 industrial platform in the universe that celebrates industry professionals all around the world. You are bold, brave, you dare greatly, you innovate, you collaborate. See, I said collaborate in that. And you are solving problems each and every day, making the world a better place. That's why we celebrate you on Industrial Talk. We're also broadcasting from OMG. Reston, Virginia is the location. This is Q1 meeting. They have 4, as you can tell, because there's 4 quarters in the year. So this is Q1, and it is a collection of problem solvers. People who debate and die on hills. We were having that conversation prior to this conversation. So we have 2 in this seat. Chris and Tim, they are in the hot seat, so let's get cracking. So how you guys doing?
Phenomenal. I mean, where else would you want to be right now?
Don't you think this is, I love Reston, but did you go out there and just sort of wander around the little walking area? Have you been down out there?
Oh, absolutely. I used to live in this area, actually.
Did you?
Yeah.
How come it's so quiet?
Well, it's
How come it's not buzzing? And it's like, I mean, I can walk across the street knowing full well I'm not going to get hit.
Wait till 4 p.m. It'll be a whole different place.
Is it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, because I'll hold you to it, Tim. What do you call home now, Tim?
I'm out of Pasadena, Maryland now.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. The other Pasadena.
I was just getting ready. When you said Pasadena, I was like, oh, California.
Yeah.
You know, I was already there.
I mean, same place. It's the bastion of technology in Maryland. Not really a lot of boats, so.
But it's true. That's true. Yeah. All right. For the listeners out there, let's give it a little background on you both. Starting with you, Chris, give us a little background on who you are.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. This is Chris Ganacoplos. And I've been with Perforce, a company that is focused on DevSecOps. So we're out there trying to help people understand how to navigate the DevOps tool chain as well as solve for problems across the way. We focus in on understanding continuous compliance and standards. I'm also a member here of the CISC governing board, and proud member to help people keep pushing standards out across OMG. So thanks for having me.
DevSecOps, development, security, operations. Is that what we call it?
That would be it.
There you go.
We love our buzzwords.
I was just going to say, no, don't go down there without me catching you, because I'm not the sharpest tool in the
smush
shed.
all the things together.
Yeah, right. Because it's so difficult to call it development, security, operations. All right, Tim, you next.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Timothy Schilbach. I'm actually the president and owner of Penacity LLC. We are strategic partners with Perforce, and we've come together to really try to automate the hardest part of security, right? And so that's the conversation we're wanting to have. Our background, or my background, is 30 years in the military, specifically as a military offensive security specialist. That's just a fancy way of saying hacker. Yeah, and I specialize in hacking industrial security systems. So I work a lot with nuclear, power generation, maritime shipping, rail systems, you name it. It's a lot of critical infrastructure stuff that we got and work with.
Yeah. So that because I have a list of questions which I won't follow, just FYI. They gave them to me, you gave them to them, and I see them. And there's lengthy stuff, so I'm not going to do that. But I get the gist. And one of the things I talked about is that continuous education, compliance, it changes so drastically and dramatically, so rapidly, right? I put a lot of words there. I did it. And when we start talking about critical infrastructure, I was just broadcasting from Distributech, which is a utility-centric grid, major infrastructure type of stuff, and security was talked about. So with that, Chris, talk a little bit about, just sort of lay the playing field. What is CMMC, right? 2.0. What is it?
Yeah, so I mean, I have the expert right here on CMMC.
So what should I just sort of say?
Just shift that question to Tim, and I will go ahead.
Go for it.
Absolutely.
Sorry about that, Chris. You should have just sort of stepped up and said, do you think that's right?
When you have a doctor by your side, you go with the doctor.
There you go, right? So CMMC, it's a cyber maturity model certification. And the government has actually cooked that up because Well, as you know, there's a lot of adversaries of the federal government and U.S. military, and they want our secrets at the end of the day. Who has our secrets? Well, our industrial partners out there called the Defense Industrial Base. So they're the people who manufacture everything you can think of. And when you think of the Defense Industrial Base, you're actually really, the face of them is, I know you think the big names out there, like Booz Allen and Leidos and CGI, and these big, great giants and juggernaut companies. But behind those are 80% of the platform is really small businesses, small manufacturing organizations, small warehousing organizations, very small businesses at the end of the day. So CMMC was really brought about in order to solve the problem of proliferation of our industrial secrets. Think like our Joint Strike Fighter missile plans, like understanding, what type of boxes are produced by a box company and what special intelligence materials go in those and where are they out of warehouses and what transport train are they on. So if you can think about the implications on the battlefield to the warfighter is that if you know where the things are at, or if you know the capability of your adversary, you can essentially run them out or destroy their capabilities to degrade their ability to wage war, right, at the end of the day. So any erosion of our industrial secrets, especially, let's take the Joint Strike Fighter, the J-35 Strike Fighter that was stolen by China, for instance. This is how we came about with CMMC, is that the theft of that really led to us formulating laws in this country, and now the organizations that are small businesses have to conform to these new regulatory laws.
Yeah, that's why I didn't answer that question.
I was just going to say, yeah, good call on your part, Chris. So let's talk about continuous standards, and with that insight, explain to us, it's a dynamic world out there. It just is. How do we even begin doing that? If I want to be connected, which I do, and which a lot of people are talking about it in here, just that connected capability, how do we start ensuring that it's secure?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing, you have to start with the infrastructure, right? Everything has to sit on something that's secured at the infrastructure level. So, that's really the core for everything. You can build on top of it. You have all sorts of ways to build your applications. Those applications go on the different devices, which in some cases are tanks, planes, depending on what's going there. But it's really about what's your policy, right? Because everybody has a different policy when they're thinking about who has the ability to make this change, who made this change last, were they approved, were they not approved. Some of the things that a lot of people don't consider is, okay, I'm in compliance at this moment in time, but what happens tomorrow when somebody makes a change? Can I change that back to where it needs to be so I'm still in compliance? What changes are going out there with other nation states? What are the jurisdictions? What frameworks are out there? And that's why it's really important to identify what your infrastructure is going to look like, but then also what's the framework it's going to follow. One of the examples that we're running into with CMMC is they want to follow NIST 800-171-172.
And that is?
That is a compliance standard that helps people understand what their baselines are in their infrastructure and then puts controls in place. And those controls could have something to do with their system hardening based upon looking at their laptop. Your laptop right here in front of me, you want to make sure that nobody has any critical vulnerabilities that have been issued to it or that have come to it. If you want to be connected, you're going to open all sorts of vulnerabilities into your environment, into your workspace.
How do you keep, and I throw it out to you, you guys can look at each other on which one we should answer this. I've learned my lesson. How do you take something like that and where it changes and could change? Let's just use let's say it changes on a daily basis. How do you ensure that you are in compliance? I mean, I don't know how is there something that says green is good, yellow,
believe it or not, it could be as simple as that.
Yeah.
So here's the problem that we've got, is that inside of our environments, like you said, they're very dynamic environments. And unfortunately, everybody in the environment has a different need. So think of it as work roles in your environment. So the management team is going to have different needs than the IT team is going to have different needs than the people on the manufacturing floors. the accounting department, they all have a different set of software and things they all need on their system. So one size just doesn't fit all, number one. So I don't think it's realistic to say I have a one-size-fits-all thing out there. Secondly, what businesses are really bad at is documenting what we call their baselines. That means that you know all the things on your environment and all the switches you flipped in order to be able to make those things the things, right, out there. And like I said, now we have this dynamic environment where changes are continuously happening. So by the time our IT departments essentially deploy the utilities and tools out into the field, they'll all have changed very often. That's the reason why it was very important to partner with like Perforce and utilize their platform Puppet, because what it allows us to do is it allows us to identify and really footprint the entire environment as an abstraction of code, and not code like in scary programming code like you see on television, right? In a declarative way of saying, I want this thing in this state, and it just figures that out for you, right? So there's not a lot of vertical learning that needs to be done here. And if done right, you could literally, on a daily basis or even an hourly basis, go into that code and say, the accounting department needs this exception, it rolls out to everybody. And then not only that, but can we check the computers every hour, every 5 hours, every day, for instance, to ensure that they're compliant, and then deliver that information back to the stakeholder who's responsible for that security. And then green is good, like you said, and then we can detect changes to the environment. Hey, if there's an unsanctioned change to our environment, maybe we should check that out. Maybe that's something that we should be not doing, right?
Does that make sense, Scott?
It does, but for me, let's just all is laid out there. Being who I am, that's still, that's an ongoing, it's so dynamic.
Yeah.
It's so big, it's so massive, it can be. And yet, do you think that the speed to be connected, to be, whatever this brave new world looks like, and the speed at which we're able to do that, and then you have the security side moves at a different pace. Mm-hmm. Do you think that there's just going to be this disconnect between, yay, I'm all connected, it's all great, no, look at these, I don't want to talk to these guys?
Yeah, we call it running fast with scissors, right?
That's right, there you go.
You have to have some sort of guardrails behind who's making the changes.
Yes.
Out there. And, honestly, that's one of the things that our organization focuses on, because we don't want to handcuff people with their technology, right? Your technology is always supposed to be moving, innovating. What we're doing is we're helping you allow for innovation, but at the same time, we're giving you those guardrails so that your security team isn't going to come ahead and push a button and say, you're not allowed to do that. We want to make sure that you have that capability so that security has already approved that policy, so that it's almost like a self-service, self-healing type of infrastructure.
Or even imagine this. Imagine you're a person who wants to make a change in your system, and you make that change, but all of a sudden it changes back because we want to enforce those baselines. We don't want people making unsanctioned changes in our environment because that introduces risk. Mm-hmm. So somebody who is in charge of risk for the organization really needs to be the decision maker, or a group of people collectively. Typically we call that a change control board, right? A board of people will get together who are the stakeholders of the organization and determine, we want to introduce this new thing. Have we thought about it? What does it introduce? And yes and no, how can we do it? But going back to your original point on can we do this from the top to the bottom?
Yeah.
How does policy converge with the technology, right? It can be as simple as putting in a ticket, your people make the change in a file, quite literally, hit deploy button, it deploys to everything instantly, everybody's happy. It doesn't need to be a very long, painful process. So the technology changes should be the least evasive thing out there. Mostly it should be focused around the policy so that the organization can have a natural cadence by which they meet, identify issues, work them through together, and then collectively implement them with a click of a button.
Nobody wants to talk about cybersecurity. We talked about that, and I'm an executive, and I just want to talk about what I like to talk about, and that's whatever, making money and production and where do we stand.
Or quantifying and offsetting your risks that could harm you from doing those functions.
But then to that point, that has to be a part of that whole thought process, right?
Yeah, no executive wants to be in jail. I mean, not that I've met, but
I was just going to say,
unless you're running for president, then potentially you might want to be in jail. It's good for publicity.
So with that said, and again, there is, how do you create a culture, environment that is constantly making sure that from the top down, and a level of confidence that I don't have to be, obsessed with it, but it just happens in a way that makes sense continuously.
Yeah, and the culture is the key word, right? The culture comes from the strategic direction of the leadership, and the leadership is looking at ways that they can reduce costs, reduce risk, make money. And to do this, they have to make sure they have a team of people that are all working together. So they want to share that information across the organization, because nothing's going to handcuff you more than having silos of people trying to do the same thing over and over again. One of the things that I'm seeing a lot now is people are trying to focus on automation is key, right, to development and reducing costs. But what do you use to automate? Do you automate a task that's very simple that you do every single day? Or do you automate something that's a very difficult task to do that's a very high priority? And I think it's that type of policy that your organization looks at, the benefits plus the negatives behind it. It's like, how are you going to go ahead and implement that into your culture? Because there's so many people out there that look at culture and they just define a couple buzzwords, but culture is how your organization acts on the cultural core responsibilities, core positives.
Tim, I'm an existing business. I've been in business for 20 years. Let's say I did. Okay. And that's the use case, 20 business. And so I've been in business for 20 years. I've been pretty successful. I've manufactured what I need to manufacture, whatever it is. But now all of a sudden I'm faced with this.
Right.
How do you even begin? What's like the step? Like step one, talk to Scott. Step two, help us through that.
No, absolutely. So I'm going to go back to what Chris was talking about. As the organizational owner, the buck stops with you, right, at the end of the day. So also knowing where your limitations lie and say, okay, I'm not the expert in this domain out here, therefore I'm not going to try to tackle this on my own. So number one, go get educated, right? This process that we're doing here, this is an educational process to help people to start to, where do I start on my journey? Education. Go out and read the regulation, find out who's in charge of dispensing these things. In this case, it's the Cyber Accreditation Board. If you go to their marketplace, the Cyber Accreditation Board will lead you to all the professionals that are certified, vetted, validated in order to be able to start to answer this problem, right? So either that or assign somebody in your organization the role of doing those things and putting that ball in motion for you. I've seen organizations, even at small scale, either hire on a consultant temporarily to provide them with a gap analysis of the organization. What are all my problems? What do I need to do? And what's my, direction that I need to go solve those things. That's a technique. You could hire somebody into your organization who has those skills, and going to the accreditation board's website and looking for somebody who's certified and actually has professionalism in implementing and sorting out these issues is, the other way to go around this. And then finding technology partners. This is the one thing that we find in dealing specifically with manufacturing is there's no one silver bullet. It all depends on what, number one, identify the business cases. Number two, drive the technologies based on the generation of what those policies and procedures or what your corporate governance is going to look like. So it shouldn't be technology driving corporate governance. It should be corporate governance, i.e. establishing the rules of what you can and can't do in your own organization that informs the policy, that informs the technology.
Can I incrementally approach it? I know that there's you want to manage those risks in a way that makes sense. Okay, I got it. But that elephant is huge.
Absolutely. Start with the basics. So let's establish your corporate governance program, number one, right? So that's developing a series of policies and procedures of your organization that revolve around the framework of CMMC or that NIST 800-171, right?
Or DISA-STIG if you're in the government.
Or it could be CIS baselines, right? There's a variety of frameworks out there, and this is the one thing I like about the government is they don't give you a blueprint that says step 1 through 12, right? They give you a lot of latitude in They basically tell you must have thing, and then you have to insert thing here. But the problem is that like you said, you're a business owner of 20 years, you're an expert in manufacturing, not this thing that we're talking about.
Yeah, it sounds like gibberish to me.
Right. So again, consultancies are definitely the way to go. Getting informed is the way to go. But also, we have a lot of disinformation floating around out there as well. So get your information from what I would call authoritative sites and stuff. So the government who's making the rule is an authoritative site. Go get your information there first, right? Because anybody can put a commercial together.
I want a Sherpa.
Exactly.
I want somebody to help me along with this thing, just because it's...
Well, give us a call. We'll help you out.
See, there it is. Now, with that said, let's talk about how to get a hold of you guys. Tim, how do they get a hold of you?
Well, you can actually look me up in LinkedIn out there. It's Timothy Schilbach. Or you can reach out to me at tschilbach@penacity.us.
Chris?
Yeah, and it's Chris Ganacoplos, Ganacoplos.
Yep.
And just reach out to me on LinkedIn. So thank you so much for this, Scott.
Yeah, my pleasure. They actually talk cybersecurity. I like that stuff. Somebody did it. All right, you guys are absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much for being on Industrial Talk. All right, we're going to have all the contact information for these two gents out on Industrial Talk. We're going to have their stack card right there. So you reach out to them on LinkedIn. They are an open book, and yes, you do. You need a Sherpa. You need somebody to help you along with this cyber. It's happening. Just whether you like it or not, you can stick your head in the sand, but it's happening, and you got to find those right people. I'm not going to read. I'm just going to find somebody. Just quite frankly. All right. Stay tuned. We will be right back.
You're listening to the Industrial Talk Podcast Network.
Chris and Tim are the gents. Cybersecurity was in the conversation, and I know we talk a lot about being connected, pulling that data, getting that information into your operations, making that business more resilient. It's all good, but we can't forget about cybersecurity and being able to do that and keeping current with that. That's important stuff. So my recommendation, yours truly, you need to connect with individuals like Chris, like Tim, find out more, make it happen. Industrial Talk is here for you. You have a podcast, you want a podcast, you want to highlight your solutions and technology, put it out on Industrial Talk. It is a platform that is dedicated to education, and you want to collaborate with these individuals, it's there too. And you want to innovate, you find out the latest, greatest innovation that is taking place and impacting industry as a whole. Be bold, be brave, dare greatly. Hang out with Tim and Chris. Change the world. We're going to have another great conversation shortly, so stay tuned.